everyone. Chris and I are just going to have an intimate chat here for 20 minutes or so, and you're welcome to listen in. But Chris, thanks for joining us. You've had a long career in the Australian Federal Police and more recently spent 3 or 4 years with NAB in the banking industry. I guess being a relative newcomer, how would you describe the digital banking landscape?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Duncan. Look, I would describe it as constantly changing, and that's not going to be a surprise to anyone here, no surprise to you. It's overwhelmingly positive, but like anything, it has its risks and its challenges. And looking at it through my lens, as the executive at NAB responsible for fraud and scams, I see the multiple opportunities that this digital environment that we operate in have created for transnational serious and organised crime, and the way that they have leapt into that environment to enrich themselves. But sort of focusing on the positives first, banks are continually looking at ways to change and adapt and use new technology to make life more efficient, make life better for their customers and for ourselves. It might not always feel like it, but we are fast adapters of technology and we're generally agile. And I think the way we managed to transition to a work from home environment during the epidemic is a really good demonstration of our ability to do that when we need to. From a NAB perspective, 94% of our customer interactions are now digital. We get 1 billion logins a year, which is 17 times the amount of traffic we get through our bricks and mortar branches. So that tells us that our customers are adapters and users of this technology as well. It's about, we're focused on creating easy, safe experiences. Like I was down at Circular Quay yesterday and I saw a busker plucking away on a guitar down there and singing and then taking payments via a tap and go system. So that tells you that this digital world is here to stay and it's been adopted by everybody.
Yeah.
On the negative side, I mentioned transnational organised crime. This environment that we're operating in now, this digital environment, it allows high speed, at industrial scale, mass attacks on customers. These criminals are able to do that very anonymously outside the Australian jurisdiction, so it makes it very hard to get to grips with them from a legal perspective. And the cost of them doing that is very low and the rewards are very high. So unsurprisingly, these groups have adopted it themselves as a means to enrich themselves.
Yeah, great. And I think you make a good point, which I think we all understand. As the pace of digital adoption accelerates, the surface area for financial crime increases, and we're seeing, the results of that. In your domain then, in financial crime, where are the opportunities to combat that with more digital innovation?
Yeah, look, I think the opportunities are really only limited by our imaginations in many respects. We stepping outside banking and looking at the broader ecosystem, we need to look at the legislative framework that we operate within and the regulatory framework. Has that legislation and regulatory framework moved with the times and moved with the technology? And I'd suggest that in areas like the tipping off legislation in AML, CTF, privacy legislation, it has not, and it requires to be updated. I think there's plenty of opportunities for us to make digital banking even safer without adversely or disproportionately impacting on the customer experience. I talk a lot about appropriate friction in payment channels. And an analogy I could use is that when motor vehicles first went into mass production, which is around 1913, thereabouts, and started to be used in mass by the population, one of the consequences of that is that we saw the road toll skyrocket. Why did that happen? It was because we didn't have the right guardrails around the use of that new tool. Speed limits, drink driving, seat belts, road markings, traffic lights, etc. didn't really exist, and we paid a price for that as a community. Yeah. We've all stepped into that space, placed safety features in motor vehicles, safety features in roads, strict road legislation, and whilst it doesn't feel like it sometimes because of media reporting, the damage caused to human beings by the use of motor vehicles has plummeted. When you think about digital technology, we're really only in the first 10, 15, 20 years of really broad industrialised digital take-up. Yeah. We need to start building those guardrails, and I think that's where the opportunities are.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, look, from your perspective, where do you see the opportunities for the industry to accelerate digital innovation?
Yeah, as the previous panel touched on, I think AI is obviously very topical at the moment. I'm sure we'll probably talk about it more. But from a Microsoft perspective, we think we're probably experiencing now the biggest technology platform shift since the internet. So if you think about the impact of the internet on our business, on our industry, we think AI will have a similar transformational impact. There's a broader conversation there, which I'm sure we'll get onto. Second, probably big opportunity is still around just cloud generally. I think the Australian market, and specifically financial services compared to global markets, is a very mature cloud market. A lot of adoption of cloud technologies through the banking industry, but still we're relatively immature in how we're exploiting it for business transformation. I think a lot of the version 1 deployments have been really replicating what we've traditionally done with technology operating models, and the true opportunity is to automate a lot of that technology operating model so you can really drive cloud native applications, transform the business with much more agility than we have today. As we know, we've done the digital veneer. There's still a lot of complexity, cost inside the technology operating model. Third area, which I think is in your space, is in the regulation technology, RegTech. At Microsoft, we've had a long relationship with the RegTech Association, really since the Royal Commission. And I think initially we were pretty underwhelmed, actually, with the pace of innovation in that space across the industry. I think the industry responded by throwing bodies at the problem with manual interventions, which it's now struggling to afford. And we're now seeing an acceleration of RegTech adoption in the industry, and this was supported by some recent research the RegTech Association themselves did, where they're seeing the time to adopt is decreasing sort of from 13 months to 9 months.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
You mentioned AI, and I'm glad you did. I'd be surprised if that doesn't get a run in every session today. Obviously, a lot of hype in the industry about it. Where does Microsoft see that going?
Well, look, as Peter said on the previous panel, look, AI has been used in the industry for some time. I think the change now, though, is AI has largely been invisible to the end user. It's been machine learning AI that's been crunching numbers and making recommendations and automations in the back end. A great example, which I like to use, a great Microsoft partner of ours, BioCatch, is deployed in most of the major banks here, and that is using AI to provide biometric authentication and anomaly detection on how consumers interact with their digital experience. No one knows that's happening, but that's AI interacting in the digital experience to make consumers and banks safer. And there's other examples of next best action. I think that the shift we're seeing now with generative AI is it's a lot more pervasive and conversational and overt. And we're seeing that with ChatGPT, which is a consumer version of it. It's not something we'd recommend any bank would use natively. But that's the fastest growing consumer application ever. It's got 200 million users in 2 months. Next best was TikTok in about 9 months. So that's just demonstrating the appetite for this type of technology. But it is very personal and conversational. From a banking perspective, from a Microsoft perspective, we're working with all our major clients, as you can imagine, and starting to ideate and explore what are the opportunities and what are the risks, which we'll come on to. But in terms of the opportunities, we really see 4 broad areas of use cases. Obviously, front office in terms of driving an improved client experience to drive the top line, whether that's through digital channels or whether that's through enabling bankers through direct channels. Back office efficiency, contact center, to reduce a lot of the operational overheads, particularly in the contact center. If you can imagine making an agent much more intelligent through some sort of assistance. Compliance and reg compliance. Last time I counted, there's 230 million pages of reg compliance in the industry. All the banks have extensive policies and procedures. Generative AI is great for summarizing and reporting back to inform a banker, an employee about what is the point of view, where am I with this compliance or this particular issue? And the last area, which is actually getting the most adoption right now, is in the space of just software development and digital adoption itself. You would have seen that Westpac came out in the press last week. They've been trialling generative AI with their software development lifecycle using a Microsoft product called GitHub Copilot, and they're seeing a 46% productivity improvement by assisting that developer to write code. And in the context of the digital skills gap and the digital skills shortages we're all experiencing, that's a significant impact that if you can make your current staff that much more productive.
Excellent. Look, just comment on that.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with you around the ability, the potential for AI to make life easier for our frontline staff. When I think about the proliferation of policy within organisations, and we expect our very junior entry-level frontline staff to be able to interpret all of that policy and make good decisions when they're talking to customers in my world around fraud and scams, a capability that can summarise and concentrate and find those key nuggets of information you need to enable that decision is going to be a game changer moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about, I guess, the risks and considerations, given you've sort of raised that really briefly, because I think it's good to balance the potential benefits with the risks, because there are genuine concerns, out there. I mean, firstly, I think Microsoft fully supports responsible AI. There needs to be responsibility in how the technology is governed. We've had a responsible AI office for a number of years, long before we partnered with OpenAI. And we need to have this debate. It's an industry-wide debate around the risks and concerns, because that's how we will govern the technology most effectively. We see a parallel here to how the industry has regulated the move to the cloud, moving data from inside a bank's firewall to a multi-tenanted hyperscale cloud. That was regulated by APRA, and all the banks would need to submit their risk assessments about how they're going to manage the associated risks of that. So I can see parallels. We'll need to do the same thing with AI as an industry as we work through these issues. I think also it's people first, technology second. The technology, as you say there, is to assist the professional. Microsoft, we've branded all our AI products co-pilots, because that's what they are, to assist. I don't know how much time you spend triaging your inbox. It's probably 50% of my time, unfortunately. If I can have an assistant helping me do that, that's going to enable me to be more productive, more effective. And then I think the last thing, which I think the previous panel touched on, is traceability and transparency. The lawyer that Adam talked about, I don't know if he was transparent about his use of ChatGPT, but there needs to be transparency about how AI is used. So any AI that's generated through the Microsoft Azure OpenAI service is watermarked, and the traceability through to the source of the recommendation needs to be there. So I think that's an important part of the whole journey here. But I'm going to switch gears here, maybe ask you a question, Chris, because it's easy for us to sit here and talk about the art of the possible with digital transformation. But the reality is, driving digital adoption and digital change is hard work.
Yep.
Many projects fail or under-succeed. From your perspective, what are the key challenges making this real? What should leaders and executives be thinking about as they look at digital innovation projects?
So many things I could talk about. Look, how do we get our legacy systems and our new technology, our new systems to connect, integrate, and work with each other? There'd be very few firms that are starting with a complete clean slate when they're moving into a change program or a transformation program. So, and the systems, our legacy systems, are still critical to our business. We need to be able to run those and use those effectively. So how do we integrate and build on top of those and keep business continuity, not creating new risks, not creating new opportunities for either data to leak out or for attackers to come in and hit us and our customers. And even if we are fortunate enough, I think, to be starting with a completely clean slate, bearing in mind that the technology that we're building today will be legacy technology in 5-10 years' time that we're going to have to build on. So thinking to the future around how do we build this so that it can be integrated into a larger technology stack down the track. I think starting with a clear goal in mind that you want to achieve, and unless there are really compelling reasons to deviate from, to do the work in the lead up to identify what you want to achieve, and unless there are really compelling reasons to divert from that path, see that through. I've seen way too many programs, I wouldn't use the word fail, but not achieve the hype because we got distracted and went down rabbit holes along the way that ultimately didn't contribute to the end goal that we're trying to achieve. That shiny ball's always going to come along, and there's always going to be that temptation to chase after it. I think avoiding that unless there's a really driving reason to do it. I was really glad to hear you mention BioCatch. They're a strategic partner of ours, and really enjoy working with that company. And that's a real game-changing, that behavioural biometrics capability is a game-changing capability and points the way to the future. Integrating that into capabilities that we already have been very, very effective in reducing fraud and limiting the impact of of some types of scams on our customers. How we deliver industrialised at-scale technology digitisation capabilities, but also make them capable to be individualised, because consumers have the expectation to be able to use that technology in an individual way. So look, there's a couple of the challenges as I see them. There are many, many more.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I can sort of relate to that. And we, from our perspective, we see the importance of sponsorship on technology change. It's the obvious one, but I think it's probably the single biggest determining factor on success, the level of executive sponsorship. We quote this phrase quite often around the Microsoft leadership table, and organisations don't change, people do, and leaders go first. And I think that applies to technology change, whether you're a business leader or a technology leader.
I think the other one there too is I think the current environment with cyber attack and scams in particular are really crystallising thinking around we want to get new products to market, and we want to give our customers what they want in terms of speed of access, connectivity, speed of payment. But we need to do that in a safe way, and so ensuring that the right controls are implemented at design phase, not thought of when we're about to go to market and we're doing a risk assessment and we realise actually we need an extra X amount of dollars and time before this thing can go live because we haven't thought about these risks.
Well, I'm glad you raised that because I was going to ask you about risk, but before I do that, I think I've been asked just to give the audience advance warning. If you want to ask a question, you can ask us a question, just grab one of the mics, and maybe after I ask this next question, we can throw to the audience if there's any questions out there. But I was going to ask you, Chris, about the risks, and you've touched on one of them there. But what are the others, particularly in your role, that keep you up at night, that you really are concerned about as you look at your domain of financial crime, but also the digital projects that you're driving?
Look, it's not an exaggeration to say I go to sleep most nights thinking about what the next scam issue was going to be. It's not a secret in Australia, it's not a secret anywhere in the Western world that consumers are being targeted and attacked in ways that they have never been before. I heard, I was in a session last week and I heard it referred to as a scamdemic, which I think is a bit of a trite way of describing it, but we are in the midst of a digital crime wave. And worrying about what we can do to provide better protection for our customers occupies a significant amount of my time. The other piece that worries me, and I'm sure it worries everyone here, and I'm sure it's part of your world as well, is just cyber attack. The intrusion, attempted intrusion. We're seeing hundreds of thousands of attacks per day against all of our organisations. It's been driven by all manner of threat actors, from state-sponsored through to lone wolf type actors. And having to be on that game all the time, thinking about that risk, planning for it, making sure we have the right defences in place, but kind of knowing that we have to get it right every single time. Our adversaries only have to get it right once. Is forefront of my mind. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a tough job you've got, and I think the ACCC came out recently and said the cost to Australia is about $3 billion in terms of cybercrime and scams. But as I'm sure we can all relate to, if you know people who've suffered scams, the human and emotional toll is much bigger than that. So it's a big job you've got. Any questions from the audience? It's hard to see with these lights, but we've got a question, I think, up back. Far away.
So, hi, this is Said. I'm from Netsul Technologies Australia. So talking about digital transformation, I think that there are four fundamental challenges with regards to the transformation. One is the process transformation. The second one is the business model transformation. The third one is the cultural transformation. So out of these three, which are the most important ones, which one do you think is the most challenging one?
I'll have a stab at it, then I'll throw it to you, Chris. Look, I think, the business model transformation, I think, doesn't always apply, but can apply. So I think when there is business model transformation, I think actually there's a greater success rate of digital transformation because there's more an imperative. I think your other 2 points around business process and culture, I think apply unilaterally to pretty much every digital project. And I'd say they're the two I would sort of focus on because unless you're really clear on the business outcome, the process re-engineering, and the culture that you need to support that, the project can just become a technology project. And technology for technology's sake, as we know, doesn't add too much value. But Chris?
Yeah, look, I'd agree with you. I think the first thing to start with is the technology that we're building being built to solve a problem, or is it just being built because we can? And it will be more successful if you're actually trying to solve a problem because you have a clear goal in mind as to what you're trying to achieve. It's a really good question because every project has unintended or perhaps unforeseen at the start at time of inception, second, third, and fourth order implications. So, for example, let's say we want to increase daily payment limits on internet banking. Very logical thing to do, particularly if we're facing checks out of the industry. But what are the second and third, fourth order implications of those payment limits? There are going to be increased fraud and scam risks. Those increased fraud and scam risks are going to require us to implement appropriate controls to reduce those risks to within an appetite. Those controls will drive operational consequences because you're going to be stopping more payments and causing customers to make contact with you in one way, shape or another. Now, some of those interactions can be automated and should be automated, but in a scam environment, and we're seeing scams increase rapidly, lots of times those sorts of conversations are multiple conversations with a customer who is so ingrained in the scam, has been so socially engineered that it can be very difficult to talk them out of it until all their money is gone. That drives operational cost into the business, and that can't be automated. That human piece of the technology cannot be automated. And so explaining to the organisation why we've built technology, it's delivering great benefits, productivity, efficiency, but over here in this part of the company, it's increasing costs because we've got to hire more bodies, unfortunately, to be able to do that work.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of everything.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I don't know if there's any other questions out there. Yeah.
So you've spoken a bit about, people first, technology second, and then you've emphasised the role that leadership plays in driving that change and adoption of digital transformation through the organisation. Can you get more on the specifics of that around what exactly is that behaviour that the whole organisation needs to adopt from top to bottom? Yeah,
well, I think it's probably a culture question that relevant to the previous question. And look, we're all digital companies and we're all software companies, we're all technology companies. So, one of the cultural questions I'd say is, okay, what's the level of collaboration and connection between your technology department and your business leaders? And do you, as a business leader, do you feel like a digital executive responsible for technology, right? Because it's so integrated into the business that you're responsible for. So I think, from my observation, when you see organisations that culturally, they really function as one team, and you can't see the divides between, tech, business process, business, then they're in a really good place. But we know that's not always the case. Any organisation of two or more people has politics, and if not everyone's aligned and on the same page, it's difficult to get things done. You can under-deliver. So I think that's why actually culture is the most important thing. because culture is about how people work together. Back to people first, technology second.
Good afternoon. Chris Taylor, Chief of Policy at the ABA. I would like to ask you a question about regulating ethics in AI. There's obviously a number of concerns that are being ventilated around the impact to customers, about potentially removing humans from decision making, and things like job losses and societal impacts. Two questions for you. Firstly, what do you see as the role of business versus the role of governments in regulating ethics in AI? And how do you deal with the prisoner's dilemma that if your business doesn't adopt AI to the same extent as a competitor, or your country doesn't adopt AI to the same extent as another country, you might be left behind?
Big question, good question. We're just out of time, I've seen. So. Look, I think it's everyone's responsibility, right? So the banks will need to have their own approach and policies and procedures of how they're going to govern ethical use of AI. In the same way they've got governance structures about how they use technology more broadly. Big technology, we've got a responsibility about how we develop it ourselves, but also how we enable our clients to develop their own policies and procedures. And it's going to take a collaboration with all industry stakeholders, including the government, about how we do this. And I think, as I said before, there's going to need to be government or central oversight, right? Because we can't just rely on industry and big tech to get it right. And your point around the sort of global competitive dynamic, I mean, I don't really have a good answer for that, but it's interesting to see how different parts of the world are taking a different initial approach. And I think market forces will play a role here as well as you'd expect, but we've got to make sure we've got the right governance frameworks in our economy here to ensure that market forces don't push us to places where we don't want to go. Another question? Yep. Oh, it's Alex.
Hi, Duncan. It's Alex Trott. You talked a little bit about AI, and obviously it is one of those huge topics at the moment, and there's no doubt that digital transformation will change in terms of the nature of that will change with AI. With all of the hype, the discussion, those things at the moment, how do you suggest that organisations sort of start that journey? Because at the moment it's very much in experimentation, sort of proof of concepts, those types of things. How do you see you get on that journey but do it safely and do it as well in a way that you can start to really understand the impacts on security, cyber, those types of things that they're going to make that difference. But with everything going on, where do you start?
Look, I've got a view. I don't know if you'd like to answer that first, though, Chris.
I'm just conscious of the time. But yes, look, I think for me the way to approach that, at least in the early stages, is to focus on initiatives that are lower risk if it doesn't deliver what you are hoping for it to deliver, and is not going to have a significant impact on your customers. So, for the sake of giving a practical example, I would be focused on backroom use of the technology to help make transactional routine type tasks more efficient and assess the effectiveness of that, and then grow from there.
Yeah. And I'll just plus one on that because that's exactly where we're seeing the initial use cases we're working with clients are that. They can see broader use cases, but they want to start on the low risk use cases. We're building MVPs on those, and they're obviously got to wash those through their responsible AI policies and procedures, and are they fit for purpose? Yeah, we are way over time. So we're getting the hook, but we're getting more questions. Do we want to take another? Adam, we're getting the cut? We're getting the cut.
Adam's got us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris.
Thanks.